Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giordano, and I'm glad you could join me for another installment that highlights the story of great patriots who have been overlooked by history but played an extraordinary role in our founding. And before I jump in, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, share it with others. Too many have lost sight as to what makes America extraordinary, what makes us an exceptional nation. And if we want to revive the American spirit, we need to know where we come from. That's why I do the America's Founding Series. That's why I highlight so many people who have been ignored throughout the years. And on the America's Founding Series, I usually start off with a question. So today's question: what happens when the revolution arrives? Not with marching armies or booming cannons, but what knocks on your door? What happens when the only thing standing between your family and survival is your own courage, your own unwavering commitment and spirit to the patriot cause? That's what I want to focus on in today's episode, because it's pivotal moments like these, the unsung heroes that give birth to a nation. And let's journey to the rugged Georgia frontier and tell the incredible story of a woman whose bravery became legendary. She was a symbol of defiance against tyranny, and I'm talking about Nancy Hart, the war woman of Georgia. Imagine a small, isolated cabin, the heart of a struggling family on the edge of civilization. It wasn't developed. The year is somewhere around 1780. The air is thick with tension. The revolution is in full swing. Nation is at war. Loyalties are fractured. Neighbors eye each other with suspicion, and the threat of violence is constant. Too many think that all the colonists were all for revolution, but many of them weren't. There was a lot of loyalists that remained within the colonies. And I want you to picture 6 armed loyalist soldiers barging into the very cabin, obviously with hostile intent. And inside stands a woman, alone but resolute, her fierce determination stronger than the muskets that are aimed at her. And what happens next? How does one woman face down such overwhelming odds? And the answer involves quick thinking. The answer involves hidden weapons, steely resolve that would etch Nancy Hart's name into the annals of American history, and it's how legends are made. We're going to get to the actual showdown, a moment that's going to define her spirit. But first, we need to set the stage, because she lived a remarkable life on the frontier. And Anne Nancy Morgan Hart, she entered the world around 1735, born in the colony of Virginia. Later in life, she married Benjamin Hart, and together they ventured south to the untamed territory of Wilkes County, Georgia. This was the frontier, a land of opportunity, but also a land of hardship and danger. And as the rumblings of revolution are going to grow louder and louder, Wilkes County is going to find itself deeply divided. Neighbors chose sides. You had Whig patriots against Tory loyalists, and the conflict often devolved into fights, raids, acts of retribution. It was a very volatile environment, and Nancy Hart stood out. Descriptions about her paint a very vivid picture. She was tall and muscular with fiery red hair, a distinctive cross-eyed gaze, and she was known for her sharp wit, but an even sharper tongue. She earned a reputation, a formidable local moniker, the War Woman. Even a Georgia Patriot officer, Elijah Clark, reportedly described her as a warlike woman determined to annoy the enemy wherever she could. And annoy them she did. Nancy Hart was a devout patriot. Her loyalty to the revolutionary cause was absolute. She held a fierce animosity towards the British Crown and the Tories, a sentiment that's going to drive her extraordinary acts of courage and defiance. And her patriotism was not confined to a simple sentiment of patriotism, right? It wasn't just about waving a flag. It wasn't just about words. She actively engaged in the fight for independence. She displayed bravery and resourcefulness. At one point, she took on a dangerous role of being a spy. She would disguise herself as a man and venture into enemy camps. Her keen eyes and ears were gathering crucial intelligence for the Patriot cause. On other occasions, she would act as if she wasn't of sound body and mind. She would act mentally shot. And this disguise would allow her to move about unnoticed and begin to overhear valuable conversations. And these were acts of espionage, undertaken at great personal risk. Understand, if she got caught, she would have been hung. But she was able to provide this vital intelligence to the local Patriot militias. And the war on the Georgia frontier wasn't just about grand battles. It was a brutal personal conflict. Homes were being raided, set to fire, families terrorized, executions were not uncommon during this period. And for Nancy Hart and her family, their modest cabin, it wasn't just a home. This was the front-line defensive outpost. And it was within these very walls that the legend of Nancy Hart would reach its dramatic peak. I want you to picture the scene. A crisp autumn afternoon, the scent of wood smoke in the air. A group of 6 Tory soldiers, emboldened by their perceived authority from the British Crown, are going to barge into Nancy Hart's cabin. And they had with them the carcass of her last turkey, a vital food source for her family. It wasn't easy to get food on the frontier. With a callous disregard, they demanded that she cook it for them. Nancy, probably seething with anger and fear, she is going to comply or else she's dead. But as she busied herself preparing the meal, her mind, it must have raced, trying to figure out what to do, how to get out of this situation. And so she's going to act with incredible stealth. She began to take the soldiers' rifles one by one, and through a crack in the cabin wall, she would hand them to her daughter who was waiting outside. The soldiers, who were waiting in anticipation of a hot meal, they remained oblivious until it was almost too late. Finally, one of them is going to realize they're going to see the diminishing pile of their weapons, and they realized that they had been outsmarted, so they moved to seize the remaining gun. But before they could react, Nancy Hart, with lightning speed and cojones bigger than most men, grabbed the last rifle, her cross-eyed gaze fixed on them, and according to legend, she delivered the ultimate ultimatum, a quote that echoes through history. "The first man who stirs is a dead man." And the air was tense. The 6 soldiers stood frozen, held at bay by a lone woman with a single rifle. What happened next? Now, we need to take a quick break, so you'll need to stick around to find out what happens next. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the 2 most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the America's Founding series. Now, if you're enjoying these stories of courage and determination from our nation's founding, please take a moment and share this podcast with fellow patriots. And if you find the episodes informative and engaging, I would be incredibly grateful if you take 30 seconds, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify, give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating, take 30 seconds to write a short review, and your support helps to continue to bring these vital stories to a wider audience. You have to understand, it takes a lot to put these together. And so as we grow, it certainly helps. Now, let's return to the incredible standoff in Nancy Hart's cabin. Before the break, I spoke about 6 Tory soldiers entering Nancy's cabin. They wanted her to cook the last turkey that she had for them. And as she's cooking the meal, she's also taking their rifles and hiding them. Imagine the disbelief on the faces of those Tory soldiers. 1 rifle left, she grabs it, she holds them at bay. And they likely scoffed, thinking she wouldn't dare to fire. Well, they underestimated Nancy Hart's commitment to her family and the Patriot cause. As one of the soldiers decided he's going to make a move and reach for the weapon, try and overpower her, Nancy Hart didn't hesitate. She took the shot, and the crack of the rifle shattered the tense silence. The first Tory soldier is going to fall. Another tries to attempt and advance, and he's wounded. The remaining four now realizing that Nancy Hart isn't playing games. She will take the shot. They realize the gravity of their situation. They remain frozen. They no longer had their egos. They didn't have their bravados. That was replaced by fear. Nancy Hart single-handedly held 6 armed men at gunpoint for what must have felt like an eternity. But she maintained her composure, her vigil, her determination, which was radiating. Eventually, the commotion is going to draw the attention of neighbors, and soon after, her husband, Benjamin Hart's going to arrive with reinforcements, and the captured Tories are going to be dealt with swiftly. I'll get to that in a minute, because accounts vary. Some suggest that they were hanged immediately near Hart's cabin, while others indicate they were taken to a nearby militia outpost for their execution. But regardless of the precise details, the fate of those 6 loyalists became a testament to the spirit of Nancy Hart and the dangers faced by those who opposed the Patriot cause in the Georgia backcountry. The story of Nancy Hart's courage, it spread like wildfire throughout the region and beyond. It cemented her reputation, not just as a formidable woman, but as a true hero of the revolution. Her actions served as a powerful symbol, demonstrating that the fight for independence wasn't solely waged by armies on distant battlefields. I always remind the audience, ordinary people, they may be overlooked, but they played a vital role in securing America's freedom. They may be ignored by history, but their story is no less important than what the Founding Fathers did, those that helped craft the Declaration of Independence, or the generals like George Washington or Nathaniel Greene that I covered a few weeks ago. It's the ordinary Americans that make this country work. And Nancy Hart's story reminds us that patriotism isn't limited by race or gender or social standing. It was a fire that burned brightly in the hearts of those who believed in this idea of liberty. As with many figures from the era, the line between historical fact and folklore is sometimes blurred. But when it comes to Nancy Hart, it's extremely interesting because many of the vivid details of life have been passed down through oral tradition. It was written accounts emerging decades after the events occurred. And we all know it's like one big game of telephone. We all know how exaggerations happen. However, there is compelling evidence that supports the core of her legendary confrontation. In 1912, during the construction of a railroad near the site that was believed to be her former cabin, we're talking Hart County, Georgia, workers unearthed 6 skeletons buried in a row. And this discovery lent significant credence to the long-told tale of Nancy Hart and the captured Tories. Nancy Hart's impact on American memory is undeniable. And in recognition for her bravery, for her patriotism, a county in Georgia was named in her honor, Hart County, the only county in the state named after a woman. A statue stands proudly in Elberton, Georgia, a lasting tribute to her remarkable life. She has become a powerful symbol of frontier patriotism, courage, the spirit of American Revolution that infected so many. She is a symbol of the American grit, which defines the United States. This grit is so important. I talk about it constantly. It's part of the American identity. And sadly, we're losing it. When we look at local tradition, it sums up her essence best. Nancy Hart did not know fear, but the British and Tories certainly learned to fear her. The story of Nancy Hart is a reminder that our liberty was forged through great sacrifices, through this grit I talk about, through the determination of patriots. Not only was it fought on the grand battlefields, it was fought in small skirmishes, in acts of defiance by ordinary people who were willing to risk everything. And they were willing to risk it for the ideals of liberty and self-governance. They could have easily stayed out of it, remained neutral. They could have joined the Loyalist cause. Let's face it. I always say Britain was obviously the bigger, the more trained, the more equipment. They were the more powerful army. And yet so many chose to take them on. You know, history constantly focuses on prominent figures, but it is the courage and determination of people like Nancy Hart that truly built this nation. And while she may not be a household name, unfortunately, because of a failed education system, Nancy Hart, the war woman of Georgia, she deserves to be remembered. And we need to revise how we teach civics in our schools, how we teach about American history. The fact that only 13% of students today demonstrate proficiency in American history is absolutely pathetic. The fact that only 22% demonstrate proficiency in American civics and government is pathetic. Our nation will not survive if we forget the stories of the past, if we forget our roots, where we come from, if we forget the founding, the intent of government, the purpose of government. And Nancy Hart is the embodiment of the American way, the fierce independence of the American spirit that lie at the very heart of this country. Now, I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of the America's Founding series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And our next journey into history that shaped our nation. Until then, remember the courage of those who came before us, the ordinary people who did extraordinary things to forge the United States of America, and understand why the United States has become the exceptional nation that it is. With all the division today, with all the denigration of the United States, it's time we remind people why the United States is still the land of opportunity, why the founders preached about limited government, why ordinary people took up the cause of liberty. It is so important. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.